Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a nice big 11 game Major League Baseball slate. As you guys probably know, I'm not a huge fan of slates that get over 8 or 9 games because they get a little bit wonky. This particular slate is going to be wonky as all get out because there's only a handful of pitchers that look pretty good, and a lot of the teams project really well today, so it's going to be a high scoring slate from the batting perspective. I think, don't know if it's going to be super home run heavy, but I do think it's going to be a batter heavy when it comes to just scoring fantasy points. So, with that said, let's go ahead and get into our pitching today. Let me actually first look at our weather concern here. Let me pull that up here. Sorry about that. Let's see here. So, we have an interesting situation here in Texas St. Louis game is probably the riskiest game, followed by the Minnesota New York Mets game, and then the Boston Seattle game, and since Chicago Cubs and Cincinnati game have lesser risks, but do keep an eye on those weather concerns because they could affect pitching as well on this particular slate. Looking at our pitchers here, so we have one. Our favorite play is going to be Hunter Brown. Now he's not a must play as he doesn't have the easiest of matchups here against Pittsburgh, but he's been pitching pretty well despite the fact he has sometimes a low floor. He's been good at home and he has some good potential in this slate. He's also one of the better K rates on the slate, though there's not too many guys that have a lot of upside from a strikeout perspective. One guy that does, though, is Tyler Glasnow for the Dodgers. He does have a slightly tougher matchup against San Diego, but he's fared well against him, averaging 20 fantasy points across 2 games this season already, and he's been solid at home. So he's also the most expensive option on the slate. He's also got the best K rate on the slate. A couple other guys to consider: Michael Wacha for Kansas City has a favorable matchup against the White Sox, though he has been inconsistent lately. His last game against the White Sox, though, he scored 30 fantasy points. He's had 3 games against them this year, and he's done pretty well in all of them. So he's definitely in play on the slate, but he definitely carries a little bit of risk here because of the situation. Looking at the other options, Michael Scherzer for Texas is an interesting play today. He does carry some risk as he's been really inconsistent so far since he's been back from injury, but he does have some potential, and he finally had a breakout game last game against the White Sox. Though he does face a little bit of a tougher matchup today, it's not too bad. The K rate should be fine, though he might give up a couple earned runs in this one. Looking at one other guy to consider is Robbie Ray. Now, he's only pitched 1 game, and of course, that was against the Dodgers. He went 5 innings and scored 26 fantasy points. Much easier matchup against Oakland. However, Oakland does have some home run upside typically, though they don't have a lot today. They do project as the worst team on the slate today. That said, his strikeout rate is not quite as great as we would hope for him, but he is capable of a good game here, so he's a good option as well. But I do think that he's somebody that I would consider here on this one. Looking at some other options, Sean Manaea, probably the best extreme GPP play available. Even though he's high risk, he does have a good ceiling at times, especially in certain types of matchups. And this one isn't the worst that I've seen him be in. But outside of that, it's really tough sledding the rest of the way from the pitching perspective. Most of them project to give up more than 3 runs, so it's kind of rough there. If we look at our core plays today, Ketel Marte, Dylan Moore, and Willie Abreu, all 3 of these guys have some nice upside, though. Moore is not a must play. He's kind of a contrarian option to be a core play, but I just wanted to include him because he's a nice value play and he helps you offset the costs of Marte here at $5,500. Because I typically don't like to put over $5,000 price plays on this, but they just look really good today, so it's hard to ignore. Looking at the catchers today, so Danny Jansen does jump off the page as the top over play for Boston. He does have a favorable match, a decently favorable matchup here. I do think he's got some home run potential, but he does have some risk. He didn't play yesterday, even though he did look good, and so I hope he does play today. Though Castillo can be a good pitcher, and so he's not a must play from that perspective. Especially with there being other guys like Mitch Garver available, who has some really good home run potential today as well. Though he has struggled at the plate most of the season, he does have good hitting metrics on this one. The top ownership here will be Gabriel Moreno, Mitch Garver, Cal Raleigh, and Salvador Perez. Obviously, Moreno and Cal Raleigh also are in play as decent contrarian plays on the slate. Looking at the first base here, Ohtani does jump off the page as the top overall play. He doesn't have the best metrics today for himself like he does typically, but he is a capable option just about any time, so he's obviously a home run threat a lot. Though he is extremely expensive, and you can get cheaper with the Matt Olson, which is kind of nice today, as he is a nice value play on the slate compared to Otani, at least. So he's still pretty expensive, and he hasn't been all that great, though he has been better lately. So he's definitely somebody to consider. Pasquantino for the Kansas City Royals, also in play today with home run metrics. This position is probably the deepest on the slate. It's actually almost deeper than the outfield today. Spencer Steer looks really good for the Reds. I do like his potential on this one as he has some run upside as well, and he can play in the outfield as too. Looking at Pete Alonso, though, he hit a home run yesterday, and I look for him to do that again today. He's had 2 straight games now. He's really been seeing the ball better lately, and he's had some multi-hit games. Uh, Isaac Paredes is a kind of a nice value play here now for the Cubs. Now he is on his new team here. He should have some opportunity though today to play and be at a good situation. Michael Bush also projects very well again today. He projected well yesterday and he had a home run. He projects good again today for a multi-hit game at least. And then kind of a Hail Mary play at this position, Tyler Locklear for Seattle. He's very interesting as a cheap option to kind of help you pay up into the positions. The ownership here, Otani, Michael Bush, Pasquantino, and Salvador Perez. Looking at the second base here. Now we do have Ketel Marte as one of our top plays on this slate. His metrics are absolutely off the charts today. He's been hitting the ball very well lately. He has absolutely fantastic home run upside today, and so he's definitely worth considering here. Altuve is a good alternative to him, though his metrics are not quite as good. He does have that potential, especially with his upside from hitting. Then we have Luis Garcia Jr. for Washington, who's kind of in an interesting spot here. I don't love Washington today as a team, but I do think that they have a couple guys that have some potential, and he's definitely one of them. Not usually the super home run guy, but just good hitting metrics in general. And then one other guy to consider, Travis Blankenhorn. He's kind of a one-off. If he ends up starting today, as it looks like he will, he has some really good home run potential on this slate, so he's definitely worth a look as he has hit home runs a lot in the minors. Marte, Polanco, Massey, and Nico Horner are the top ownership options here. And I think Marcus Semien, Jorge Polanco, and Bryce Turang are also available and viable choices on the slate. Rafael Devers at third base does jump off the page as a very good play, though he has to score a lot of fantasy points to really pay off here. Meanwhile, Austin Riley is over $1,000 cheaper, and he has just as much upside today as Devers does. But I think you probably want to go cheaper here with Moore, as Moore has very favorable metrics today. He's been very inconsistent this season, but he does draw good hitting metrics on this slate, so he's definitely a nice value option for this particular situation. And then Isaac Paredes, who I already mentioned as at first base, can play here at third as well. Dylan Moore, Matt Chapman, Ryan McMahon, and Royce Lewis are the top ownership here, but Royce Lewis, Chris Morel, and Eugenio Suarez have some contrarian upside on this particular slate. If we look at shortstop here, this position is a little weaker, though Dylan Moore can also play here. Now, C.J. Abrams, Bobby Witt Jr., Corey Seager are all available and expensive. I do think Bobby Witt Jr. has just been so good lately that he's hard to ignore. At this price point, though, is hard. He did score 33 fantasy points yesterday with a walk-off grand slam. Looking at the other options, Dylan Moore obviously could fit here as well if you want to go different at third base. But I think you probably want to use him there. And then you could also look at Tyler Fitzgerald and Ezekiel Tovar as owners' top-owned options here. O'Neill Cruz, Francisco Lindor, and Ella De La Cruz, they all project well today at this position, but they have tougher matchups, so they're not must plays. Maybe in the outfielders, Wilyer Abreu is our top play at this position as he has really good metrics today for good hitting and even some home run potential. I think he's a little bit, he's not the best option I've ever seen in the outfield, but he's definitely up there. Otani, like I already talked about, can play here, but if Randy Arozarena is in the lineup for Seattle, he'll be somebody to consider. I think Seattle's an interesting team today, even though they have a tougher matchup against Boston. I think that they definitely have some good home run potential guys, and Arozarena is one of them if he ends up in the starting lineup again, because he is day to day because he ran into a wall yesterday. Randall Grichuk for Arizona is a guy I really want to try to target some today, even though he doesn't have a lot of home run upside. He's got some good multi-hit potential today, so he's definitely worth a look here as he just projects really well. Um, some other guys to consider: Jaron Duran, Cody Bellinger, Victor Robles today is very interesting for Seattle. He doesn't have home run upside either, but he does have that good hitting metrics today, so he's definitely worth a look. And then some cheaper options: Ian Happ, Corbin Carroll, Brian Reynolds, Sia Suzuki, Marcell Ozuna, Spencer Steer, and Masataka Yoshida. The ownership here: Randy Arozarena, MJ Melendez, Lourdes Gurriel, Randall Grichuk, Jake McCarthy, and Otani, followed by Buxton, Taylor Ward, Victor Robles, Charlie Blackmon, and Hunter Renfroe. So overall, this slate I think is going to be somewhat wild. I don't think you necessarily have to stack up on home run hitters, but you do need to get guys that can get multi-hits, and a lot of the guys today project really well for that, and the pitchers definitely don't project all that well either. So one thing, guys, make sure to check out Discord and the links in the description. We have some fun in there. So, and I do put some other statistical data stuff in there at times, especially today. I did with what with the sheet that I write up before doing the video each